Good evening and welcome to Know Before You Grow, a committee of Petaluma Urban Chat. I'm Dan Like, thanks to Sharon Kirk and Dave Alden for doing all the real work, and Kevin Goulding, who has joined Petaluma Urban Chat as our treasurer. And to the rest of you who participate in so many ways, not the least of which is just caring about the community and being here, and being careful about your mute buttons. Tonight, Scannell Properties will present a proposed development along the Petaluma River beside Shamrock Materials on the industrial site where I'm told they used to cast big bridge beams. But before that, a few announcements and housekeeping notes. We have lost our speaker for July 27th, so the next Know Before You Grow event will be Thursday, July 28th. That's lunch at noon at Aquas. In Dave's notes, he said, with the pandemic hopefully behind us, ha ha ha, but we'll meet at Aquas anyway. We may push ourselves outdoors. Friday, August 5th, the American Institute of Architects Sustainable Design Assistance Team, AIASDAT, will be coming to do as part of a 4-day study of 15-minute neighborhoods in Petaluma. We'll be looking for public input on Friday, August 5th during the day and in the evening. I have already reworked my schedule so that I am available that evening. You should too. Details will be provided as they get finalized, but if you block some time out there, that would be awesome. So on to tonight. Usual warning about Zoom bombing. Hasn't happened in a while, but if things get weird, the meeting will go suddenly blank when I lock it. I will kick the offenders and hopefully not kick too many innocent people and then get back to it. Just hang with me. If I kick you accidentally, try to reconnect. We have participants who are subject to the Brown Act. Elected and appointed officials know what this means. If there's someone on here you expect to be speaking up who isn't, that's probably why. If this confuses me or confuses you, it confuses me, ask me or someone about them another time. So tonight, Walker Williams, development manager at Scannell Properties, is going to talk to us about Scannell's proposed development at 500 Hopper Street. They talked with several of us from Know Before You Grow a while back. We were not unanimously impressed. They took the project to the Planning Commission back in February again and got a little pushback there. And so they've reworked things and hopefully are coming back from that shortly. Well, they're coming back tonight to give us the revision plan. I'm going to leave the chat room open so that you can feed me questions, but two notes on that. First, I'd like to stay focused on the presentation. So please don't inundate me in material that I need to fact check on the fly. It's hard enough to keep track of what I am or what I haven't asked out of that list. Second, also, please keep in mind the developer has a piece of property, and when they develop it, they're doing something that they think will pay off, and the city needs housing. The city has, through the implementing zoning ordinance, put some limits and expectations on what the developer can do with that property. The IZO was an update that came out of the 2008 general plan, and what the city has said that they and we want in this space obviously influences what developers can do with it. So as we have our reactions to the proposal and our questions about it, let's try to think about how the city has asked for a certain kind of development in that space and how the proposal we're seeing is a reaction to that, and both be clear about our questions for the developer and how we want what we're seeing here to inform how we speak to the general plan process, which is currently ongoing, because those are different things. And also remember that both this development and the Oyster Cove project that we saw several sessions ago are going to be subject to CEQA, and there'll be room in that part of the process for a lot of the environmental things. So if we're pushing back on environmental stuff tonight, think about it as finding more information so that we can better inform the CEQA process. So with that, I'd like to turn the screen over to Walker Williams. Walker, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Dan. And I appreciate everybody at Know Before You Grow. Can you guys hear me and see the screen okay? Everything good there, Dan? All right, give a thumbs up.
All looks good here, yeah.
Perfect. All right, well, like Dan introduced me, my name is Walker Williams. I'm the development manager at Scannell Properties and the applicant for this 500 Hopper Street project. Back in February, we submitted our plan to the Planning Commission, and we participated in a planning session to receive comments and feedback to our proposed 500 Hopper Street project. And that original plan, so just kind of remind everyone, for those of you who weren't able to attend, that original project included 159 market rate homes in a density of 14.3 dwelling units per acre. Also, it included a commercial campus. On the top left, you can see in the blue portion of the screen. So I'll get into that commercial campus a little bit more. So that was kind of the main, and also there was an affordable residential component, including 72 units, which we're partnering with Eden Housing. That was also included in the project, and then open space, as you see along the riverfront. So those were the primary components of the project. And just to clarify, the market rate residential is for sale housing. The affordable residential is rental apartments that for qualifying low-income residents. And the open space, as it was presented back in February, was 7 acres of what we would call passive open space. So there were no ball fields or any active uses and that kind of thing. So moving on, just to kind of show you what the old commercial phase looked like, because what you'll see in a few minutes is one major thing that we did was receive feedback from the Planning Commission and update our proposal. But what we had proposed back in February was a commercial campus including 170,000 square feet of office space located in 3 separate buildings, building A, D, and C, and 3,700 square feet of retail in building D. Phase 1 on the left side was going to include just building A. That was the primary structure, the large office building, and that was going to be planned for Amy's Organic. Prior to the onset of the pandemic, Scannell had agreed to a build-to-suit lease with Amy's, but sadly, after the pandemic, their need for office space evaporated quickly, as did many office users during the pandemic. So we had to kind of rethink that, and what we were planning on doing was just offering up a speculative office building, which means we didn't have any sort of tenant signed up for a lease. We were just planning on building the office space as is and then leasing out space within that office building. So one thing we thought the city would find advantageous to this plan was the creation of 600 to 900 jobs. Well, one thing we heard when we went to the Planning Commission was that's not necessarily the case. Because we were a little bit closer on the commercial side to Smart Station and downtown, there was actually quite a larger need for added homes and project density. We heard concerns from commissioners and the public that we can improve the project by not only adding density, but prioritizing housing over the commercial campus. We could increase activated park space, not just use the open space for passive park space. And then one big thing we heard was, where's the river access? You know, everyone wants to actually use the river, not just look at it. So that was a big one, and you'll see how we tried to incorporate river access into our updated project. All right, moving on. Our current proposal for 500 Hopper now includes the following features you see on the screen. We've started working with a multifamily developer, Trammell Crow. Their multifamily division is called High Street Residential. And after working with them over the last few months, our plan is for 249 additional for-rent apartments, which would be in lieu of the commercial office campus. So you can see that in the upper left portion of the screen. Those would be market rate apartments. And also, we had one major change in the market rate residential. We've added the opportunity for 31 accessory dwelling units, ADUs, within the single family homes. So after you add up the additional 31 units of ADUs and the the added 249 for-rent apartments, that brings us to a total of 510 housing units rather than the 231 as originally proposed. So we've over doubled the amount of proposed housing units, dwelling units. Another major component is the increase in 3.5 acres of a community park. So we still have the 7 acres of open space that runs along the river, adjacent to the riverfront, as originally proposed. However, in the new proposal, we have activated uses in the 3.5 acres, effectively creating a 3.5 acre community park. And we'll get into that river access, the dock, a little bit later. So kind of continuing on this topic of density, the primary feedback we received in February's Planning Commission meeting was that we need to increase the density of our project. So in other words, we really need to create more dwelling units. We added the 31 ADUs, and we actually had to reduce one of the housing units. So we have, instead of 159, we actually have 158 dwelling units because we needed to make room for a parking area for riverfront access, which I'll get into a little bit later as well. But ultimately, this slide is just showing you the updated density increase from 14.3 dwelling units per acre to over 22 at 22.72 dwelling units per acre. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into the multifamily housing component that has been added to the project since February. I might even get out of this plan because I realize you can't really see that site plan very well. So if you don't mind, I'm going to escape from this and get into this. Here's a better look at the site plan. So this allows me to show you a little bit closer up. So we're proposing 9 buildings. One reason that you see this kind of spread of buildings all over the site, the SMART code requires us to acknowledge Hopper Street as our frontage. So even though the SMART station across the way is not much to look at, we realize that we need to acknowledge that Hopper Street is our frontage. And so we're working with planning to create more of a home style approach to Hopper Street. We're looking at potentially raising the finished floor elevation of the bottom floor up 3 or 4 feet, and it will create somewhat of a front porch along Hopper Street. So that's still in the works. But ultimately, to get the density that we really needed and we heard that was wanted as part of this project, we created these large 4-story buildings in the central portion of the commercial project, and then also along the riverfront. So you'll see buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're somewhat mirror images of each other, but they have 4 stories of density. And then we actually have connected the inner 2 buildings on the top 2 floors, which I know you can't see here. I'll try to zoom in a little bit to show you what we're doing. But basically, we heard from the Development Review Committee that we needed a breezeway to connect the 2 parking lots and also to access the leasing and amenity building. So what we did was we're opening up the bottom 2 floors of the building so that we could have pedestrians access the leasing and amenity facility, and also so there could be even flow or open flow to the open space plazas north and south of the leasing facility. And that also allows us to connect just the corridors of the upper 2 floors. So we're still looking at how that would work if we could add some units in this area or if it's just the corridors. So that's still in the works, but we feel like this is a good agreement with planning because they felt like the buildings were a little too large. The length of the buildings were around 300 feet, and the code only allows for 150 to 175 for Main Street buildings. So we needed that break for more of a human scale experience for these buildings. So ultimately, we're still asking for a warrant, but it's a lot less of a warrant. These buildings are in the 175 length range, but it's a lot less of a warrant, and we feel like it allows us to achieve the density that we were looking for on this site plan. So some of the other elements, as far as landscaping and parking, they're still in the works, but as you can see, I think that this should achieve what the Planning Commission requested of us in February. They were looking for something that didn't have to be fully vetted out, but really just a sketch that can show something that's a little more in line with what the city's goals were. Go back, give me 1 second. All right. All right, so our current proposal shows a variety of home configurations included in specifically this 3-bedroom, 3.5. This is just an example. There are several different variations with varying square footages from 1,600 square feet up to 25. But this one, I'm highlighting this just to show where the accessory dwelling unit would go. It needed to be in one of the larger units so that it afforded enough space for an ADU and still have sufficient bedrooms left in the home. But as you can see, we just added the ADU above the garage, and we have a separate staircase to access the ADU. And there's an exterior exterior entry to that staircase, so you can access the ADU without accessing the main home. And one thing we've focused on is density. So we've updated our density slide, which was shown to the Planning Commission in February, and I think this just highlights the similarity of our project, the seamlessness of the Riverfront project to our project, but also the fact that we're trying to increase the density, even though we're still offering single-family homes. So it's a nice transition and a nice complement to the existing approved Riverfront project. And I know it's hard to tell on this, but if you can see where my mouse is, to the right of my mouse is the approved Riverfront development that's under construction now, basically south and east of where the ball field is. And everything west, which is the orange is Eden Housing, and then the red and yellow are 500 Hopper. That's everything that we're proposing. And just one more note. So on average, the Riverfront development consists of around 4,100 square feet with their courts averaging, or their small lot courts averaging around 3,500 square feet. And for the 500 Hopper project, where our courts are around 1,000 feet smaller than Riverfront with no conventional housing, and we're offering attached homes as well in the range of 2,400 square feet for those lots. All right, so I won't go through these numbers, but as you can see on the screen, we're just comparing the density of 500 Hopper Street to Riverfront. It breaks down for the number of units, the number of acres, and then the dwelling units per acre. So Riverfront, just to summarize, is just under 13. And when you include the multifamily aspect of our project and then the added ADUs, we're up over above 22. All right, so enough about density. Let's move on to a more fun topic. How about parks? So we really appreciated the valuable feedback from community members and commissioners back in the planning session in February, and we're excited to show you some of these elements. So our project now includes direct river access through a floating dock where community members can launch kayaks and stand-up paddleboards. It also includes a dog park with dedicated space for large and small dogs that are separated. And then also what we're calling a village green area, which is including turf areas for volleyball, fitness stations, picnic areas, and also has a lookout point. All right, so I'm going to show you a little more close-up views of this activated park. So in this area, this is just south of the multifamily. You can see the 60 DUs. So this is just south of that larger building on the multifamily site. We've got a new parking lot, which I'll focus on the next slide, but really we're looking at direct river access. We've got a stand-up paddleboard and kayak staging area there in the brown. So it's adjacent to the parking lot. So, one focus was reducing the amount of parking, but we needed to provide an area so that kayakers and canoers could bring their bring all their equipment, and then they could stage it before they get into the river. So we felt like this amount of parking was needed, just in able to enjoy the river. So we're also envisioning this kind of as a main entrance point, or one of the two main entrance points into the community park, so that everyone can enjoy the trail that we're building. All right, so here I just want to focus a little bit more on the parking lot. So we're actually adding an adjacent bike rack facility, and that would be next to a restroom facility. So think of this as kind of your home base. If you've got small children and they ask to go to the bathroom as soon as you're getting ready to get in the water, we're not going to leave you stranded. So we wanted to provide a place for you. I see you laughing, Dan. You must have some kids. We're not going to leave you stranded. And then we've also got some bike parking facilities, and the bike repair station along with the bike racks. All right, so for the dog lovers out there, we wanted to give you guys a place that you could take your dog and just let them, run loose a little bit, make some friends in the neighborhood. So we've got two specific areas. The smaller 3,200 square foot area is for small dogs, and then the 9,000 square foot area is for large dogs. And I would be remiss without saying that we have not scrubbed this plan or reviewed this plan thoroughly with the city departments yet. We have gone in front of the DRC, but we were mainly speaking about the multifamily component of our project, not the parks. So if the community or if the city feels like there's a better usage for these 3.5 acre parks, we would, we're open ears. This was just our first go at activating the parks. But when it comes to the dog park, we wanted all the dogs to have an opportunity to, be on the riverfront. So we've got a small, the small dog park is also adjacent to the river in addition to the large. And this is kind of what I would call midway point in the activated park. I'm actually going to scroll back up. So the river access that we first talked about is kind of on the north side, just south of the multifamily. And it's pretty easy access for cars because you come straight in off of Hopper, and the parking lot is just right at the end of this, what is proposed to be a 3-way stop. So then the dog park is kind of on this small peninsula area that kind of juts out into the river a bit. And then the last thing I'll speak on is the Village Green area, which takes up about 2 to 2.5 acres of the park. So the main area is this Village Green. So let me scroll down to that. All right, so this is kind of the lower one is kind of a zoomed out version. So it's more of a linear park, and we realized that there's not really anything like this to date in Petaluma. So this is a little bit of a newer proposal that we're bringing before you today, and also the Planning Commission. So we would love to hear your feedback. But there's already a proposed and a constructed a ball field that's adjacent to the riverfront development, and right across from Eden Housing, where the affordable apartments will be. So we thought, adding another field, and also when you've got Steamer Landing kind of across the way, this linear park is what we think is a pretty cool addition to the network of parks within Petaluma. So again, love to hear your feedback. But as you can see, we've got some opportunities for different types of activities. What we're proposing is just volleyball right now. We show 3 separate volleyball courts, 2 down here at the bottom right, and then 1 up here at the bottom left. So this is just south of where the dog park would be located. We've got some trees and shrubbery to try to, block any sound or visual impedance from those people living in the community. And we've thought about even adding something like a paddleboard. We know there are a lot of paddleboard advocates out there, but one thing about paddleboard is it is pretty loud. So unless there's a big constituency for paddleboarders in Petaluma, which I'm sure there might be, our first proposal was volleyball, just so that we don't cause too much of an adversarial view on the future residents of this area. And then one thing I want to mention is our tot lots. So we've got 2 playgrounds basically that we're adding, and this is kind of the central, what I would call more the pedestrian-friendly access. You could still access this if you wanted to drive into the neighborhood, but you would have to park along the street. So there's no parking lot adjacent to the tot lot, but you could easily park on several spaces along the street. But we've got one area for the 5 to 12-year-olds, and then one smaller tot lot for the 2 to 5-year-olds. All right. So one thing that we heard was that the commission is really focused on reducing parking, and we're striving to cut vehicle emissions. That's one thing we want to do with our project as well. So one of the ways to do that is to support alternative transportation methods is just to reduce parking. So a couple things that we've done is in 22 of the units we've added 1-car garages in lieu of 2-car garages. So 136 of the single-family homes now have 2-car garages, and then the remaining 22 will have the 1-car garages. In addition to that, we removed 112 parking spaces from public streets, and we've identified that on a separate map. But basically what we tried to do was just remove parking on one side of the road. We also looked at adding more units in lieu of that extra 12 feet of space, and we couldn't get to any additional units, but so we're currently talking to planning to decide what to do with that extra 12 feet of space. It could either be additional trees, it could be a wider sidewalk. So, we're open to ideas on how to use that extra 12 feet of space in those 112 removed parking spaces. And then the last thing we did, and this was one of the things included in our activated parks, we're just adding the bike repair stations. So one thing that has always been a part of the project, so this hasn't changed since February, but one thing that's important to us is the Riverfront Restoration. And so this is more of a reminder slide, but we're basically offering to invest up to over $4 million of restoring and stabilizing the riverbank conditions. So as you can see from the bottom right, there are some pretty gnarly retaining walls that exist adjacent to the river, and it's really kind of it just shows you how the use of the property used to be industrial, and so now that it's residential, we felt it would be best to just remove those altogether. And so if you can envision, if you look at this drawing in the upper right corner, the kind of what's existing is more of just flat earth on top and then a steep edge to interact with the river, which really makes it difficult for people to actually use the river. And we got this directly from ULI, from the Urban Land Institute. But basically, if we can lay back that river edge and kind of provide more of a gradual transition over that zone, what we can actually do is create wetlands. So we're excited about that. We're going to clean up and restore the previously inaccessible river edge, remove those dilapidated timber and steel structures, and then restore the natural tidal estuary across the property. So that's going to increase about 0.8 acres of shoreline slope, add 0.15 acres of wetland, and then also restore 0.12 acres of wetland. So the last thing I want to make note of here is that we're adding 3,000 feet of riverfront trail, and that's going to be 14 feet wide. So that should be able to accommodate foot traffic and bikes. All right, so one thing we wanted to note is just the response to questions. So during our planning session, we heard commissioners request to include restaurants along the riverfront, and we also heard calls for higher buildings with retail on the bottom floor. So based on our project's proximity to Petaluma's downtown and the current market trends for housing, we did not include such structures in our updated proposal. We feel, since our project is already close to Petaluma's downtown, residents and visitors are already close proximity to the established retail and restaurants, and we would not want to compete with those businesses. And maybe even more importantly, our project does not include the additional substantial parking that retail and restaurant businesses would require to support those patrons. So obviously we could modify the plan to include that extra parking, but then we would be going against some of the other comments that we had received in February about decreasing parking. So, you know, we're trying to figure out what the best path forward is. And then one other question that we heard was, well, what about off-site improvements? You know, there was some confusion about the Caulfield Bridge, the Corp Yard, you know, what are the future plans for the Corporation Yard, the Steamer Landing pedestrian bridge, and then the smart pathway. So we definitely support and are willing to work with the city to accommodate future plans for some of those off-site improvements like the Steamer Landing pedestrian bridge or a pathway to smart, but those components alone cannot be borne by our development alone, just simply because of the cost and feasibility that it would be. And we've looked at that, and as you can see from some of our previous commitments, it's going to cost quite a bit to build the activated parks, to build the trail, and then also restore the riverfront. So we feel like we're doing as much as we possibly can to make this project work, and we will continue to support the city if those off-site improvements are something that the city wants to pursue. All right, another thing that we heard was, I think we heard this from Commissioner Alonso and Hooper. They expressed their concern over our current proposal, which shows the affordable housing units that were across from the former city sewer treatment plant in the Corp Yard. And so this treatment plant and the Corp Yard are scheduled for demolition and redevelopment at some point in the future. We've been in contact with the city about that, and the city is just not ready to share those plans yet. So when any affordable housing is built for 500 Hopper Street, we're not anticipating this to be across the street from the former sewer treatment plant, because at that point it will just simply be gone. So I know those plans are are in planning concurrently, but considering the entitlement approvals that are still needed for our project, the design approvals that will then be coming forth after those entitlement approvals, and then also the funding that Eden Housing will have to acquire in order to even start construction, we're probably looking at least 4 years at the quickest that Eden Housing could even start their affordable construction. And one thing we just wanted to remind everyone is that we're incredibly excited to maintain our partnership with Eden Housing on their proposal for 72 units of affordable housing. It's still 15% of the project, so if you take 72 units, divide that by 0.15, you get right at our unit count, so we're trying to maximize that unit count. And as we've stated in the past, but just to reiterate, Eden's proposal will serve a range of households from 30% to 60% AMI, and that's going to be 1 to 3 bedroom apartment units. So we know this is something that is vitally needed in Petaluma, and would allow working families to live near transportation downtown, and also some of the cool amenities that we want to bring to this area. So this is, I won't go through this table, but this is just a quick breakdown that you can see the spread of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. You add the manager's unit to get you to 72, and then the breakdown between extremely low and very low income units. And one thing just to highlight, just as a quick reminder, for those of you that are in the Planning Commission meeting, you heard this, but the reason that Eden is able to achieve those extremely low and very low units is because we're granting them the 2.6 acres to build this housing development. So the land is free and clear. We're just going to give it to them for $1. And you know, they will be able to achieve that because the land is free. So obviously they'll still have to pay for the apartment buildings themselves, but with that being their only cost, they can get pretty low into the income requirements for AMI. All right, so I think I've talked enough. I'm getting to the point where I'm just summarizing, but just to summarize, we've got 510 residential units now. 90 small single-family lots, 68 attached homes. And I didn't really get into the difference between those, but basically the attached homes have about 8 inches in between them. So they would share a foundation. So it's similar to a duplex, but they're separate homes. Then the addition of 249 for-rent apartments, and we kept the 72 affordable units with Eden Housing. We split up the 7 acres of open space, added a 3.5 acre activated community park, and then part of that park is river access and recreational connections to the surrounding community. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss our project and the updates we've made recently. So love to open it up for questions.
And we've had a couple come in here, and if you want to stop sharing, that way they can see our smiling faces. Yeah, a couple things have come up. The easiest one is, and I should have asked you this before we stopped sharing, can you identify a landing location for potential pedestrian bridge to steamer landing? Is there a...
And the answer, yes, I can. I'll share.
No, share again. Sorry.
No problem.
And yeah, I don't, on the smiling over the bathroom, I don't have any kids, but I'm getting older, so
Okay. Well, yeah, we all need the restroom.
Yeah.
All right, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
So I'm using this zoomed out version. So the potential future connection to steamer landing is here in this sort of peninsula that juts out into the river. We've talked about adding it here at the north side of the site next to the multifamily. And there are reasons for that, but there are also reasons against it. The main reason against it that we would want to add it here is that it's the shortest distance across the river. So this is sort of a choke point. And if we build it here, there's about 180 to 200 feet of free span that would be required to connect those, the two paths. And if we're in that 200 feet range or less, we could actually avoid adding a pier in the river itself, which would just, it would be basically just a free span over the top of the river. If we were to build a pedestrian bridge here, it would be a lot more difficult to make that connection. We would probably have to add a bridge pier in the middle of the river. And that specific location is actually here, where we show an outlook point right now. So it's just kind of a pedestrian cul-de-sac, if you will. But we could continue that into the steamer landing bridge.
Cool. 2 questions about bike amenities. What's the service of the riverfront path going to be? And then asphalt. Okay. And then do we know anything about what's going to happen along Hopper?
As far as the pedestrian connectivity?
Yeah.
So along our property frontage on Hopper, we will work with the city to improve that. We've actually already worked with them to add some parking and sidewalks. But at the edge of our property, that's where the improvements would stop. So that's where we could work with the city potentially to help them in whatever way possible. What we're saying is it's infeasible for us to build the extra almost a mile. Maybe it's not a mile. I think it's 0.6 miles last time I checked from our site to the smart station. So it would be about that far to make that pedestrian connectivity, and that would include purchasing a part of the Shamrock property that's adjacent to ours along the frontage. So that would be a fairly involved project. But yeah, we would definitely work with the city on partnering in any way we could to make that happen.
Okay, yeah, I just came in on this. Will the city require the project to pave Hopper and make it a complete street? And it sounds like that would totally muck your financials all the way up to the smart station, but you're working with the city on the stuff that's in front of you, your development.
Correct.
So I note Google Maps tells me that from the furthest location in Riverfront, it's a 15-minute walk to Lucky. So most of your development is a 10 or 15-minute walk to Lucky, with the proviso that people have to walk across Lakeville, which, yeah. Which is, I would note for those people sending me bike path comments in the chat, Lakeville is a complete street. As horrible as that is. There's been a little question about like a coffee shop or something in the development, and I think you said basically you didn't have a way to make that pay off given all of the rest of things going on.
Yeah, correct. So for a coffee shop, typically those tenants want to be on some sort of main thoroughfare, whether it's a busy street or something that's got a little more pedestrian traffic, like a downtown area. So given the fact that there are already several coffee shops in the area, our proposal now is not to have any type of retail, simply because, for the parking demand and also for the lack of through traffic on this site. It's not off the beaten path because it's near downtown, but it's definitely not a path that's even after the development that would be traveled by a lot of people, since it's within a neighborhood. So although we have thought about that, we just don't think it's going to be a winner in the future if we had some sort of retail component.
I know retail right now is a hell of a thing to bet on. Yeah, a number of comments about whether you think you'll meet the city's VMT requirements.
So we've talked with our traffic engineer about that at Fair and Piers, and basically the short answer is, we haven't studied this thoroughly just because we're not to that point in CEQA yet, but in general, the difference between adding multifamily versus office is actually an improvement in VMT. So I don't know exactly why that is, but we asked him to look at the difference between, multifamily apartment for dwelling units and office, and they actually said higher density for residential is better on VMT. So I'm sorry I can't give you a more technical answer, but we did at least vet that in general with Fair and Piers.
Okay. A question of didn't the planning commission express a concern about double loaded streets near the river? Is there an estimate of how many units would be lost if the streets became single loaded, giving more, I guess, visual connection to the river from the streets?
I'm sorry, could you explain that a little more? So single, are you?
So I think the particular question was about having buildings on both sides of the street along the river, and it looks to me like you'd lose quite a bit of density if you dropped the houses on the other side of that street, on the river side of that street. Do we know how many that is?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It looks like we would lose about, if it's just, so there are several streets that front the river. Looks like about 30 to 40 units that would be lost. Okay. So yeah, I think just in order to maintain density, that was the main reason why we kept those units where they are.
Sure. I know that in the on the previous presentation, which presumably nobody else was here for except for me, Dave, and I don't know if why am I blanking? Bill is on here. We talked a bit about sea level rise. I'm noticing that it looks like the lowest area is where you're having the multifamily stuff, where you talked about actually going up a couple feet for the sake of frontage appearance. And even that's still a solid 2 meters above sea level. What do the 50-year and 100-year projections look like for that?
Yeah, that's true. The multifamily side of the site has the most potential for increased sea level rise. If you look at some of the models out there, what we've looked at is the 2080 model, simultaneous with the 100-year storm, and that contains 200 centimeters of rise, and our all of our finished floors are still 1 foot above that elevation. So what we're showing for at least the 2080 model, the site will not create an increased potential for inundation due to sea level rise.
Okay. Yeah, it's obviously the NOAA map that I'm looking at here doesn't do hydrology very well, but there's a lot of other areas of town that start to get into trouble before your area does. Let me get back to my list here. So I think we've already talked a little bit about trying to overcome some of the constraints on Hopper and getting to transit, and how it would really put a huge economic burden on your development to lay that all on you. So yeah, any thoughts on kind of smoother transitions to Hopper and how the city might help facilitate that?
Yes, and I'll just add a little more color. We actually looked at all of the property that we would have to purchase in order to make that work. And there's actually a pinch point. There's that strip of retail that runs along Hopper Street right before you get to D, right before you make that curve. And the part that made this really challenging, more than just financial, was if you build at a minimum a 5 foot sidewalk, there's only about, I think there's 3.5 to 4 feet at that pinch point in front of those businesses. And the only parking to the community that they have, or to their customers, is adjacent to that area. So basically they would lose most of their parking if you added a 5 foot sidewalk in front of that strip of retail. And I think then you would push them out of compliance with the smart code, basically the parking portion of the code.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of became, if it was simply just a financial situation, it would be one thing, but I know that in particular made it extra challenging. So the direct path down Hopper is not, I don't think is going to be feasible for that reason. So you might have to go around them more towards Oyster Cove, which would just make it even longer of a run. But at that point, at least it would be potentially feasible.
Okay. A number of questions about hard surfaces and permeability, and what are you going to do to make sure that all the areas that can be permeable are, in terms of dealing with heat and water runoff, and then will the storm drains be filtered?
Great question. So when you talk about filtering, there's a couple different ways to do that. You can do that mechanically, or you can do that through bioretention areas. And so far in our design, we've chosen the bioretention areas. So if you don't mind me sharing real quick.
Please, yeah, because I think this is one of the things we really liked about the earlier proposal was you gave a really good rundown on all of the ways in which you're helping protecting the river.
Yeah, so I apologize. Really, this presentation I gave today is more of a focus on what has changed in the project since February. I tried to highlight some of the things that are part of the project, but to keep it within the time frame, I took out some of those more technical issues. But basically, these proposed bio areas are in between the homes and the riverfront. So, like for example, this 40, I don't have the grading plan in front of me, but 40 would drain to a bioretention area before that stormwater would make it into the river. So we've got these kind of lined throughout the development. This is just the best picture of a zoomed-in version of the bio areas. And those will be more finally designed once we get into the SPAR, the specific design of the civil engineering. But we have made room for those bio areas. And if you can see, you can probably squint, you can see a few of the bio areas just north of the playgrounds, and then also kind of in between, in the middle of these two walking areas. So we've made space for those areas, and they're kind of spread throughout the site, which is more of a I guess you'd call it more of a low impact design type of way to treat stormwater. Basically the idea is you want to treat stormwater where it lands, not in some big centralized detention pond that over the span of 5 or 6 years becomes derelict and it looks terrible. These bioretention areas are a little bit better way to do that.
Cool. Let's see, I'm running through, there was a good, let's see, what else? Running down here. Oh, this is probably way early in the process, but given that a good portion of transportation seems to be headed towards electric vehicles, are you thinking about charging and yeah, how people might do that and what additional power loads you're going to have for that?
Yes, we have considered that. And basically, I believe the code requires an electric charger in either a portion of the homes or all of the homes. And whatever the code requires, we'll obviously do that. And if there's some additional kind of above and beyond thing that at the City Council and Planning Commission would like us to achieve, we would strongly consider doing that. One other thing, in the multifamily 8-acre parcel, I know they're planning on covering a portion of the lots and putting solar panels on top of those covered areas. And actually, I might have a plan that shows you that.
Cool.
I don't have it handy, but basically there's just, a portion of the kind of vast parking area by the multifamily will be covered in carports that have solar panels on top.
Okay. Any insights about the sewer infrastructure to and from this area and the riverfront area? And I believe this is from a planning commissioner.
Is that, I'm assuming that's storm and not sanitary.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that infrastructure to know.
Okay, so there are, I believe there are 2 existing stormwater outlets that have already been approved by jurisdiction. So the Corps, State Water Board, and it's at one point the city. And so the idea would be to connect to those, but we would be retaining, or I should say detaining, stormwater appropriately so that any increase from the added, any increase in stormwater runoff from the added, what am I trying to say? The impervious surfaces, that would be held back and detained within the bioretention areas, and potentially in mechanical filtration systems. I don't think this has been designed to the full yet, but yeah, the idea would be to hold back that stormwater after 72 hours and slowly release it into the system so that it wouldn't overflow the existing infrastructure.
Okay. I noticed a comment in the chat about water use, and I just wanted to point out that high density developments with native landscaping like yours tends to be relatively low water use per capita residential, and residential water use per capita is like 5% of California's water use allocation. So long before we talk about adding worrying about additional water use from adding residential units, we should be talking about other ways to manage water. Let's see, what others? Question about having looked into providing passes for residents, smarter Petaluma Transit as a way of mitigating VMT. And I'm going to get ahead of you and then let you answer this. I think that that's probably something that, because you're selling most of the units or all of the units and having other people manage it, that would be the kind of thing where the rental units, the management of the rental units and the low income units would take care of that. But
well, yeah, so there's a list of actually, I've forgotten the name of the list, but there's a list of things that we must achieve in order to meet our VMT requirements that are part of CEQA. And so I don't think you have to achieve all of those, but they're just a list of different options for the things you have to do. And that's one of the potential ways that we could mitigate VMT, is to issue those types of passes. So it's not off the table, it's potential. Because we're selling the homes, like you said, I don't know if there's a way that we would have to tie it to the title of the home or how we would do it. It's probably something that would work better with the multifamily apartments and the Eden housing, considering that's most of the units anyway. It's about 3/4 of the units, and it will be, a central manager that would be managing those units.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we would definitely consider. Also, something that I didn't mention in this presentation was the fact that we do have a proposed bus stop adjacent to the Eden housing affordable block. So that's, that will, assuming that can be built and that the city can achieve that, then that would help allow people to get to and from all the essentials.
Do have a question here suggesting the housing market is quite polarized. We've got, the full market rate is extremely expensive, and the subsidized is, well, we need a hell of a lot more of that. Yeah, what kind of price points are you talking about hitting with the ownership units?
Yeah, I can comfortably say it's less than $1 million. When we started this proposal in 2019, we were talking in the 700s and low 800s. I doubt that number is the same today, but I think I can comfortably say it's less than $1 million. That's the idea, to hit that smaller unit housing gap, even though they're not all for rent, or they're not, extremely small, like 1,000 square feet. They are filling the gap of the kind of the 1,600 to lower 2,000 square foot range.
Okay. So I think we've been going for about an hour. If we can keep you for a little bit longer, we do have one hand up from Veronica, who I suspect is going to talk a bit about 15-minute neighborhoods and walkable neighborhoods. Veronica, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much. Yes, I'm just reflecting back on our previous presentation. Thank you so much for today's presentation, by the way. But I wanted to just ask the question, because what I heard from the planning commissioners before and the public was that this site was really intended for mixed use and for it to be walkable and bikeable. And we have been looking at our general plan and having many discussions about dynamic neighborhoods that have amenities, have everything you need within a 15-minute walk or bike ride. And I wanted to just put the question, why was this not explored in this proposal?
So which element of what you just stated do you think is not being proposed? Are you saying a retail component, or you mentioned mixed use? Is that what you're focusing on, the retail?
Well, I'm talking about diverse mixed use. So as opposed to having, affordable housing over here and having rental apartments over there and having single family over there and calling that mixed use. That's not mixed use. So it's dynamic in that you have, if you look at, creating a neighborhood where you have amenities and you have a variety of housing types available, so that you have work close to places where people live. So I'm just trying to figure out how this typology is going to support our climate goals and what we're trying to do. And the last meeting that we had, there were many voices that said that, and I'm kind of surprised. I feel like you listened to density, but nothing else was really incorporated.
Okay, so I think I can respond at least to the inclusionary aspect, because I think what I heard was in our proposal, we've got affordable, we've got market rate, we've got apartments, but they're all separated. They're not inclusionary, they're not mixed together. So the Eden housing block that we're basically donating to Eden Housing, in order for them to achieve the deeper affordability, so the 30% and the 60%, 45% AMI, the only way to do that is to allow them to design one block of homes. So those homes have to be located adjacent to each other. That's not how it would be preferred. That's just how we can reach that enhanced or that deeper level of affordability. So I think that's the best way that I've heard Eden Housing describe it. And as far as the multifamily housing goes, the idea behind that, so in order for us to partner with Trammell Crow, who's a respected developer, and basically High Street Residential is their multifamily division, they are looking at purchasing that portion of the site from us. So we would continue to be the master developer all the way through entitlement and approvals, if that's the direction of this project. And then we would, upon those approvals, we would sell that 7 or 8 acre parcel to Trammell Crow. So it's difficult to achieve the inclusionary aspects of the single family and the multifamily, just simply because those will be separate parcels created by a tentative map that will, create those separate parcels, and they will be owned by different people. And then the single family homes, those will be homes that will be owned by individuals as well. So we'll have home builders that will eventually build the homes and then sell them individually to each of the homeowners. So I don't know if that answers your question. I know you had a question about climate change, but I don't know how that is related to the inclusionary aspects. So maybe you could kind of reiterate that portion of the question.
Well, before that, can I just jump in and say, I think that it's also the number, I guess they're JADUs because they're connected, but the ADUs also provide a lot of middle income housing spread in the more expensive homes. Anyway, back to you, Veronica.
Okay, well, thank you so much for answering my question. I was thinking, I guess when I looked at what the original vision was of this part of our city, because it's so close to the train station, single family homes, and separating out like that was not the intended use. So I understand the limitations, and I appreciate you answering the question. I wanted to just find out if there was an exploration, something that was more along the line of what was said in the last 2 meetings. But I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
And then we just had one question pop in, ask, can we take out 1 or 2 corners on homes and put in small stores just to meet needs of locals for basics? And I'd point out once again that Lucky is within 10 feet or a 10-15 minute walk of most of this platform. And the city can do that by changing zoning. We used to have mixed use all over this city, including a vacuum cleaner repair shop on Mountain View, which, if you can find that in the current, but that's more a city question, I think, than a developer question, especially with the additional costs and complexity of managing retail in the era of COVID when retail is dying anyway. Sorry, I didn't mean to take the show from you, Walker.
No, and I suppose to respond to that, I can just kind of reiterate what I said earlier, and I'll try to state it in a different way. I've worked on retail developments in the past, and although we don't have a retail component, I would say the main reason is just simply the market. I mean, any major retailer, or any minor retailer for that matter, cares about eyes and vehicles. And right now there are basically no vehicles traveling along Hopper Street, and that will not significantly change with the addition of this with this community. Although it will increase, of course, but I mean, typically retailers look in the thousands of vehicles per day before they even get excited about a site. So, although there could be some sort of neighborhood or community retail on the bottom floor of an apartment, I think if that was a potential, we would definitely be looking at it. Well, we would be looking at it, and we just don't see it as a potential. So, you know, unfortunately, although it's a tricky site because it seems to have a lot of visibility, you can physically see the site from Highway 101. So although there seem to be a lot of eyes on the development, there aren't any that would be particularly passing, you know, a retail shop. So, you know, unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to be the highest and best use for this site. You know, the location of the Smart Station, how it kind of separates Hopper Street from the rest of town, from Lakeville, it kind of precludes a bottom floor mixed use, in our opinion.
Cool. I noticed, Dave, you've got your hand up. Ah, caught him unaware.
Nah, I should have unmuted myself earlier. Sorry about that. I want to push back on Walker a little bit on this one. And, you know, one, I absolutely agree with you that the market for retail is poor right now, and you're not going to find anybody who wants to be in that project. However, Petaluma has a carbon neutrality goal by 2030. If we truly meet that goal, and that's a major reach, but it is our goal, you are going to need some retail in there just so people can walk and get a quart of milk without getting in their car and driving to Lucky's. So I would at least like to see some acknowledgement of that future need and some flexibility where certain units can become retail in the future or are designated retail today, but are temporarily put into residential, just so we can keep the goal of carbon neutrality by 2030 alive. I'm not sure it was a question, but sorry about that.
No, I hear you, Dave, and I definitely appreciate the sentiment. And I think we would love to market the site as retail. You know, adding a couple hundred units, well, 500. I think with multifamily, it definitely becomes a little bit closer. It's just simply not enough for retailers. But I mean, it's definitely something that we can look into. So I hear you. And we'll take a second look at it.
Cool. Well, I think that I have managed to represent most of the comments in the chat in questions, and I think we've run through them. And I will obviously let me make sure that I've got a full save of the chat here before we end. I will send those off to you, Walker, and we can, yeah, and we'll also get a transcript so that make sure that you've got the automated transcript, make sure that you've got all of this information going forward. Thank you all for joining us this evening, spending an evening being involved in your neighborhood. I know there were several other things I wanted to do this evening, and I'm here. And I'm glad all of you are too. And thank you very much, Walker, for coming back and giving us this look at the development.
Hey, you got it, Dan. And I'll just say one more thing before I go. For those of you who are planning on coming to the Planning Commission meeting, I apologize in advance because you're not going to see much of a change. We worked hard to try to get this proposal put together over the last few weeks. So it's pretty much going to be the exact same thing you just heard.
Cool. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, y'all. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walker. Thanks, Dan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.